hablar como si estuviera en mi casa. Siempre digo que en mi casa se quejan de que hablo demasiado alto en voz. No grito, hablo en voz alta. Sorry, I was joking in Spanish. Ahora sí. Es muy importante que por este micrófono esté entrando bien a los que están viendo y escuchándonos a través de las redes. It's very important. I was talking about that, the importance that in the middle of the crime of war that we are living, we will have today the hard power, but the important participation of very important delegation of the Ukrainian civil society. And it's important because we believe that to overcome this democratic, humanitarian, and international drama, we need to have the participation of the soft power. And in this case, I believe this delegation is very important to analyze today, to receive today our questions. But before the meeting, I want to say at the same time, this is the position of the Argentine, the administration, and our team to express our solidarity to your people and to your country, to your culture and your democracy. Thank you so much. Lila, we will present the members of the delegation.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. And I'm very glad to announce that we have more than 100 people attending this event by Zoom. And our new hybrid, which is very useful and allow us to reach much more people. Everybody knows what is happening in Ukraine, but not everybody knows the real reasons and reality in Ukraine. That's why I think it's so fundamental to spread the truth about myths and realities in the history, in the politics, in the actual war, which has not begun a year ago, some people say, but 9 years ago, with the annexation of Crimea and the support to people who wanted just a different regime of government, not separated from Ukraine, but more autonomy in the Donbass. And that's why we're so glad that we have the opportunity today to hear the word of eminent representatives of civil society in Ukraine, who are not, and I repeat, who are not representatives of the government. They are not an official delegation. They are not representatives of Mr. Zelensky's government, but they represent academy, human rights defenders, the church, Greco-Catholic Church, which is very, very substantial in the Ukraine number of believers, and also the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Ukraine. So you see, it's a delegation which has many facets, a very interesting one, and we had a small conversation before coming here, and I can say they are very interesting people to talk to. So I don't know if you have established an order between you. Yes.
Guess who is the first?
Professor.
You have the self-organization.
Yeah.
Professor Alexei Garan is an eminent academic in Ukraine and he of the Mohila Academy, a university very well known. I've listened to him even in conferences in Washington, D.C. through Yeres and Ponar's program. And I'm looking forward to hear what he has to say today. The floor is yours.
Yeah, how should we proceed with this one?
With that, you're going to be, maybe, yeah.
Buenos días. Yeah, okay, buenos días. Look, who we are representatives of Ukraine.
Professor, before you begin, excuse me, I'm just going to make a small advertisement. The session will be in English, as you all know, but if anybody has a question in Spanish, wants to be translated, yeah, we have two translators here that can help us translating the questions and answers. Please.
Claro. So yeah, we do not represent the government line. We understand that at the time we stick to a famous slogan, El pueblo unido, jamás será vencido. But still, even during the martial law, we have possibility to disagree, criticize, so it's possible. So the level of democracy, even under martial law, is very high. And that actually explains to a great extent what we are fighting for. We are fighting for democracy. We are fighting for values. If you are in Russia and you say that this is war, what would happen to you? Go to prison. Prison, exactly. Because it's criminally persecuted. So yes, this is a war between totalitarianism and democracy. We are fighting for our freedoms. We do appreciate the support from Argentinian government and Argentinian. So that's really important. Your support in the United Nations, the humanitarian help you are collecting. You voted for territorial integrity of Ukraine, for suspension of Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. Very, very important and very much appreciated. Muchas gracias. However, yes, we are asked many times in different countries, are we ready for negotiations to stop the war? Yes, we do. And we are doing that since 2014, when Russia attacked Ukraine. We tried negotiations, we tried compromises under different presidents, but Russia wanted more and more and more, and Russia canceled all agreements it signed. So we know in Ukraine, because I showed my phone number, and just today there were 3 air alarms we received to our phones. The information about air alarms in Ukraine. Putin is not fighting Ukrainian army. He's actually losing on the ground. He's fighting Ukrainian civilians, bombarding the whole Ukraine. Unfortunately, I cannot open it here, but look, that's how it looks. You know, we receive the signals of alarm, red. So today we had 3 air alarms all over Ukraine. So it means people need to go to shelters. Then when it's over, green light, people may come back. That's how we live. So why Putin is doing that? Why he attacked Ukraine, violating all the agreements with such a brutality? And is it the threat of NATO, which Putin is trying, to impose on the narratives here? No. In 2014, when the war started not now. that was started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. So when Putin attacked Ukraine, it was Ukraine was non-bloc, had non-bloc status, like you. Can I please show the slide number 20, okay, of my presentation? Hopefully we will see. But no, number 20. Yeah. Okay, so we had non-bloc status, and Ukraine disarmed itself. Yes, here it is. So the red line shows people who would like to have very friendly relations with Russia, even to join the union with Russia. So you see, red line, very, very high. But in 2014, it totally collapsed. Why? Because Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons. In 1994, unique case in the history, unique case, we gave up in exchange for territorial integrity guaranteed by great powers, including Russia. So, next slide, please. Support for NATO, which is blue line. You see, in 2012, minimum 12%. 12% of Ukrainians wanted to join NATO. The official status of Ukraine, non-bloc country, and Russia attacked non-bloc country, non-nuclear country, the country to which it provided security guarantees. So definitely after that, beliefs that we can live with Russia peacefully totally collapsed. And support for NATO increased. So we asked, for example, for the status of major non-NATO ally of the United States, which you have. You have, Brazil have, many other countries. The United States refused. Why? Because they are very cautious in dealing with Russia. They didn't want to provoke Russia. There was no talk about it, no talk about support from NATO. We asked NATO to close skies when Russia attacked Ukraine. NATO didn't do that. Okay, so what Putin is saying about NATO's threat is actually a bluff. Again, he attacked non-bloc neutral country. Why did he do that? And I would like to explain it to you. So it's not only about territorial integrity, it's about very existence of Ukrainians as a nation. And we need to come back to history. Slide 3, please. So you'll see the map, number 3, please. So number 3, yes. So you see what was the largest state in Europe? It's the year of 1000. See? In gray. It's called Kiev Rus state. In the year 1000, Moscow didn't exist. So Kiev is older than Moscow at least 600 years. It had the largest state. Okay, so it's about Ukrainian history, traditions, culture, so it's very, very rich. But we know that history is a very complicated process. So after Mongol invasion, you know, a lot of dynamics changed, and Ukraine and Kiev became part of Russian Empire. In Russian Empire, my university, which was founded in 1615, which is older than Moscow University, graduates of my university helped to found Moscow University and they were very naive. So they helped Peter the Great. And then my university was closed down because of the policy of Russification. Ukrainian language was banned from the public use. Ukraine was called Little Russia. Ukrainians were called officially in the Russian Empire, Little Russians. So what can we hear now from Putin? Putin is saying there are no Ukrainians as a separate nation. It's just, one nation with Russia. So he denies our right to exist. And what they are saying, Putin, Russian propaganda is the ideological background for the genocide of Ukrainians in Ukraine. That's why we are fighting for territorial integrity, freedoms, democracy, but about our very survival as a nation. The closest example of what's happening in Ukraine is Saddam Hussein attacks against Kuwait. You know, the logic, the narrative was the same. Kuwait doesn't exist, didn't exist. It's part of Iraq. How international community reacted? Do you remember how Argentina reacted to that? You joined the international coalition to push Hussein out of Kuwait. You sent your battleships and helicopters, 4 battleships and 2 helicopters, if I'm not mistaken. It means you were not neutral in rebuffing the brutal aggression. What we see right now is even worse because Russia is nuclear power. They are conducting huge atrocities against non-nuclear power, the founding member of the United Nations. And as an example, for the first time in history, Russians occupied nuclear power station, which is the largest in Europe. Can you imagine what is the danger for the whole world? Okay, so we believe that trying to persuade Mr. Putin to withdraw from Ukraine, and this is the only aim which we have. We would like to have the territorial integrity of our country restored and continue to exist as independent state. I am criticizing President Zelensky a lot, but it's for us, for Ukrainians, to choose who will be the next president, not for Mr. Putin. Okay, Mr. Putin is not in the right place to teach Ukrainians democracy. We are proud of being democratic, and we would like to stick to these principles. That's why I'm saying that, yes, all the support which is coming to Ukraine is welcome, and it's necessary to continue to pressure Putin in different spheres in order to stop this brutal war and invasion. I will stop here. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Very much, Professor Aram. Now, if we follow the order, maybe Alexandra Brick can go on. She's an expert on human rights and have been actively tracking all the crimes that Russia is committing in Ukraine. And she belongs to the Center for Civil Rights Society and Liberties, the Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine, which has won the Nobel Prize last year.
In peace. Yeah.
So please, the floor is yours. We're honored to visit you.
Thank you very much. And it's a big question here. And thank you for your interest to hear what we have to say, because we came here specifically to share with you the experiences that we go through and live through every day. And in fact, the Center for Civil Liberties has been operating for a very long time in Ukraine, promoting human rights values. But during the last year, we have been primarily focused on documenting crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine. And the initiative that has been established that unites 24 of civil society organizations covering the entire territory of Ukraine has documented so far 34,000 crimes. These are all war crimes, crimes against humanity. So everything that you can see in the news reports, on the pictures, killings, tortures, kidnappings, deportations, filtrations, attacks on civilian infrastructure, and so on. This is exactly what we are documenting. This is exactly what we document pain. And I remember well when I first went documenting myself. It was a small village next to Bucha, and you probably know this name because it has become a synonym of the Russian massacres committed on the occupied territories of Ukraine. And I remember the first time when I spoke to the person, her name was Tatiana Melnichuk, and she witnessed how Russian soldiers shot her husband 3 times, and the neighbor, her neighbor, 2 times, simply because they happened to be in the street outside when Russian soldiers were passing. So there was no reason why these people would be shot. And it was a miracle that her husband survived, but the neighbor died. And we were recording her testimonies. And it was extremely painful to even listen. And imagine now what it feels like to go through something like this. And then we went to their neighbor, and their neighbor, the neighbor's house was hit by a direct bomb, Russian bomb. So it was completely destroyed to the ground. And we were just walking around this destroyed building, seeing everything that has left. And you can actually, you could actually tell that it was a direct hit. Why would the Russian army, Russian soldier, hit a direct attack on the house where people live? What kind of military necessity could there be? And then we were just walking through this small village, and we were just talking to the people in the streets. And there was not a single family in this village where somebody would not be killed, injured, or whose house was not destroyed. And this is exactly the type of the crimes that we are documenting. This is exactly the types of the crimes that are taking place on every occupied territory of Ukraine by Russian soldiers. And how do we know that they are the same patterns that are repeated? Because whenever these territories, part of these territories, get liberated by Ukrainian armed forces, we receive access to these territories, and we see exactly the same places for torture, including with electricity, for instance, exactly the same places where people would be kept as civilian hostages, which goes against the international law. We would find mass graves where people, simple civilians, would be buried, and this is if they are buried. Because in many cases, as you have seen in those horrible pictures, the bodies of the people would be laying in the streets. But it's not only those people on the occupied territories that are currently suffering, it's basically everyone on the entire territory of Ukraine. Because as you might know, Russia has been directly attacking energy infrastructure of Ukraine. What it means is that there is lack of electricity, and whenever there's lack of electricity, there is lack of heating. And it had started to happen before the winter. Winters in Ukraine are cold. We were lucky to have not such a cold winter in Ukraine this year. But sometimes we would not have electricity for days. And whenever the electricity is off, the network is also down. So there is poor communication. And when I am not able to reach my family that is currently staying in Ukraine, obviously, I don't even have access to the information that they are alive. And whenever there is no electricity, people sometimes are not even able to cook food for themselves, because if there is no gas, and there are residential buildings in Ukraine that have no gas, people are not even able to cook food. So you can imagine, and then this air attacks that Professor mentioned that take place daily. So you can imagine how difficult it is to continue not only to protect the territory and the families and the lives, but also to continue to live and have faith in the victory that will eventually happen. And why are we doing this? Why are we documenting all these crimes? I always say we do it not to become historians, but to make sure there is justice that is delivered to all the victims of these crimes. And I know how important, and given the Nobel Peace Prize that organization was awarded last year, there is a reason for that. There is a reason why human rights defenders that are documenting crimes committed by Russian army in Ukraine have received a Nobel Peace Prize, because there cannot be peace without justice. And there is a very simple way to understand what we Ukrainians want whenever you talk about peace. Imagine that somebody breaks into your house, kills your wife, rapes your sister, destroys the furniture, says, now this is all mine, now let's make peace. Would you agree to that? No, of course not. You would want this person or people to be out of your house, to compensate the damage that they have caused, and for them to be held accountable for the crimes they committed. Isn't that fair? I think it's not only fair, but it's also in line with the international law, which Ukraine respects greatly, and which Argentina respects greatly. And this is exactly why we have not only been advocating for the accountability for all these crimes that we have been documenting, but also accountability for the crime which cannot currently be prosecuted and adjudicated by any institution in the world. And I'm talking about the crime of aggression. Out of 4 grave international crimes, there's one which is sometimes called the mother of all, the crime of aggression, because all other crimes follow from this one, that cannot be prosecuted and adjudicated by any institution, including the International Criminal Court. And this is exactly why we have been strongly advocating for the establishment of the so-called special ad hoc tribunal that would address the crime and make sure that there is accountability to the Russian political and military leadership, which has taken this decision and decided to execute it, to invade a sovereign state in violation of the international law, the provisions of the UN Charter, being a permanent member of the Security Council, in violation of the UN Charter and all existing provisions of Geneva Conventions, Rome Statute. And if you look at the present, why Russia is at all able to do this now, you will easily see that Ukraine was not the first. There was Georgia, there was Chechnya, there was Mali, Syria, Libya, all these places where either Russian government or Russian affiliated groups have been committing crimes. But the Russian political and military leadership has been enjoying impunity for decades. This is exactly why we strongly believe that not addressing this crime of aggression by not establishing the tribunal would set an extremely dangerous precedent. It would send the signal to everyone in the world that it's okay to invade another country, to annex certain parts of its territories, to commit all these crimes, and then have no responsibility for that. The other conclusion that countries might reach if this crime is not addressed is that the only way how you can protect yourself is to have more weapons, including nuclear weapons. Because the very particular example of Ukraine shows, Ukraine, as Professor mentioned, that has given away its nuclear weapons, has been always a peaceful country. This very example shows that if you don't have enough weapons, the international law cannot protect you.
Unfortunately.
So if we don't want to end up in a world where only weapons mean that you can protect yourself, then we need to make sure there's responsibility for this crime of aggression that has been committed by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. And this is why we ask for the support in any form, even if public statements in favor of establishment of such tribunal, and then, of course, voting for the resolutions in the General Assembly in support of this accountability in general and establishment of the tribunal whenever they are tabled, and it will be tabled eventually, is extremely important for us to make sure that we not only protect Ukrainians, but we stand by and protect the democratic values and the freedom and international law. And I think I'll stop here because we have other panelists to also participate, but I will be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I agree. 100%. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. It was a very moving and powerful big statement and absolutely just. I mean, thank you, thank you. And now we're going to listen to Anna Lubima, who's Director of International Cooperation Department in the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Ukraine, a very active member of the Chamber. I know because of my acquaintances and former collaborators in Kiev, that she's always there working for the economic development of her country. So please, Anna, the floor is yours.
Dear members of our Argentine Council for International Relations, dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to express a deep gratitude to Argentina for sustainable support of Ukraine, for your humanitarian aid, but we need your support more. Yeah. Because it is really essential to support Ukraine on different levels. And I represent the biggest business organization in Ukraine, and this delegation, I cover economic issues. And if you'd like to support Ukraine in another way, you can also support our economy by buying Ukrainian products, by investing to Ukraine. And I'd like to mention that we are still fighting and war is ongoing, but besides, life goes on. And Ukrainian companies form 50% of our budget now. They pay taxes, they continue to keep economic front. Unfortunately, there are a lot of losses and destroyed buildings, factories, lands, and Russia caused $700 billion damages now in Ukraine. And notably, 54 billion it is environmental damages. And our country, our president presented a peace formula at the G20 summit last year, and there are 10 items. And for example, food security, energy security, nuclear and radiation safety, environmental security is also listed in this formula. And I think that it is more than important to support this idea now, because not only Ukraine suffered from this war, you know about higher prices, higher inflation rate, and sudden disruption of supply chain caused such situation. We know that there are a lot of climate changes all around the world that also decrease the collection of crop. And now we have a real threat of food insecurity. Ukraine is responsible for a huge amount of agricultural exports, like Argentina. And we feel responsible to continue to cultivate our harvest, to continue doing business in Ukraine because of food security. And we remember like our farmers collect, harvest, and bombs and missiles explode near tractors and near farmers. And a lot of farmers are died as well. And I'd like to mention some figures because Ukraine fighting and we are really resilient, but there are a lot of decreases in our economy. Our GDP fell down to 30.4%. Our trade rate fell down to 30% and export to 35%. Inflation rate is 30%, and we need to to grow our economy. So I'm here like a representative of Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We try to find new points that can be possible for cooperation. And I know that Letizia have done a lot for intensifying our bilateral trade. She's really active in promoting Argentine wine, and she created such project for collaboration of producers of Ukrainian cheese and producers of Argentinian wine. It is a good example of cooperation. And when we talk about bilateral trade, we know that Argentina export tractors to Ukraine. Ukraine can export fertilizers to Argentina, and we can create some joint ventures to process some agricultural products, and it can be beneficial for both parts. For example, if Argentinian company can invest to Ukraine and establish joint venture with some Ukrainian farmer, then these products can be processed, and it will be like goods with value added. And it can be sold to in other countries, and it's a good example and a good variant how we can cooperate. The same situation with like Ukraine can invest to Argentina. It is also can be beneficial for both parts. And we had a meeting with Ukrainian Argentina Chamber of Commerce, and today I will have a meeting with Argentinian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Probably we can discuss more possibilities for cooperation. For example, export of embryos of bulls and cows to Ukraine, and then selection of these embryos in Ukraine. Also, like good example how we can cooperate. And I know that this year is planned to hold the sixth meeting of Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, and Scientific Issues. And within this meeting, we will organize business forum that can be also interesting for your members to participate. I try to be positive, but also I'd like to mention some problems that we have for our business nowadays. As Alexandra mentioned about blackouts, it is really affected our factories because you understand when you do not have electricity, you cannot operate. And so when we talk about companies, it is one issue, but when you talk about hospitals, and it is a question of life. And just imagine during the surgical operation, in one moment there is no electricity and the person died because it is not a possibility to continue. But our Ukrainians are so resilient. We try to find some solution how to solve this problem. A lot of companies can buy generators and operate on this basis, but it is also like another way to deal with it, to change like traditional ways of electricity to alternative ways. So to build more solar power plants in Ukraine, wind solar plants, power plants, and so on. And I'd like to mention that the biggest solar power plant in Ukraine was situated in Ukraine, and it is plundered by Russian troops during the occupation. And and I mentioned about tractors that Ukraine by Argentinian tractors also had a factory who produced tractors and special technique in Kharkiv, Kharkiv tractor factory. It is destroyed now. And what about fertilizers? During this war, the production of fertilizers in Ukraine fell down in 6 times. That is why we can cover just domestic needs. And yeah, that is why it is also a question how we can continue our cooperation, because the quickest way to open up international trade is to stop this war. and also is the best way to mitigate economic consequences. That is why we call on international community to withdraw Russian troops from our territory. Yeah, I would be happy to answer your questions, so don't hesitate, and thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you very much. A very clear picture of what working and producing in Ukraine is today, and living with the cost of war. And now, last but not least, as they say, Reverend Igor Shaban, who is the chief the inter-religious dialogue in the Greek Catholic Church, which, as I said, is a very important church in Ukraine, with a fantastic spiritual leader, Sviatoslav Shevchuk. Lived in Argentina, loves Argentina, and we are sending our best regards to him through Reverend Shaban. Reverend, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting us here. I will try to be short because I know you all have very questions to us. But as you heard about international law, some economical things, the globe is very small. We are very close to each other, even if we have such much kilometers between us. And if some country suffering, I think all in the world need to be touched by this. And Ukraine really suffering from evil. That's aggressors came to our country and he's buying whatever he wants. Nobody stopped him. Of course, thanks to good people and to other countries that support us in different way. And as a church representatives here, I, of course, asking all of you first for praying, because I know the Argentinians are very believers here. That should be very helpful for us, but also you can say loudly about this evil what comes to other countries. Because when we keep silence, it feels more powerful. But if you will say something again, it should be helpful also to other people who are not sure do they need to do something or not. So I'm sure that Argentinian people love peace as well as Ukrainians will fight against this evil that comes to our country. We as Ukrainian fighting, we defend our country, and our soldiers not only regular soldiers on the front, it's singers, opera singers, teachers, professors, they all defending families, streets. Because when the aggressor comes with a gun, you cannot stand with a stick. You need to answer properly. So thank you that you are with us and we are ready to listen to the questions and answer.
Thank you very much, Reverend Shaban. Well, if you have any questions, I suggest that the first questions, please, let me will be directed to Mrs. Drick, because she has to leave earlier. She has another meeting waiting for her. So if you please address first the questions directed to her, or if there are questions in the audience, we're glad to receive them. Martin Piñeiro.
The director of the Agricultural Committee.
Thank you very much for a very interesting explanation of the presentations, very informative for us. I think most of us in Argentina follow very closely what's happening in Ukraine, and I think there's a great interest in the final development. I would like to ask one question and then make a comment to Anna. The question is to Dr. Alexei, which is, you haven't mentioned, or rather, what happens in the future in the conflict will depend very greatly on the support from the European Union. You haven't mentioned anything about how secure you feel about the continuity of that support. And I would be very interested if you had any reflection on that. The comment to Anna is, of course, Argentina has a very similar agriculture to Ukraine. There are very many possibilities of great cooperation. I belong to a network of, let's say, thinkers or scientists on agricultural economics. And we had a relationship with the group of what we call here La Bolsa de Cereales, which I don't know exactly the translation, but is the place where the cereals are bought and sold.
Grain stock market.
The grain stock market. And we had a relationship with your grain stock market, and we did some exchanges, and that was lost. But it would be very interesting to build that. So maybe afterwards we can talk a little bit and see with more detail, exchange ideas of what we could do in the future.
Thank you. Other question? I want to say that sorry. She need to leave now.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, yeah.
I sincerely apologize, but we have a very tight schedule here, and this is for a reason, because we have a very limited time here, and we've made all this way here to meet many important people, and we're very grateful for all the interest that you have and for being present here either physically or online. But I do apologize. I will have to leave now. If there are any questions that you had to me, maybe colleagues will be able to answer those. If not, I will be more than happy to be in contact later. And thank you again for the interest, for the support, and for the solidarity.
Another question here? Want to speak about the
I remember what's the question? I can comment about like our grain storage, because it's also an interesting situation now. You know about the blockage of our seaports. There were 18 seaports in Ukraine before started. Now just 3 of them operating within the framework of sea grain corridor. And now it is a threat that this agreement will not be prolonged. That is why we will call on the international community to support to prolong this agreement, sea grain corridors. It is essential, not only for us, but for Africa, for 50% of all the countries, because we export, our export of sunflower oil is amounting 50% of wholesale world sale. So just like imagine what can happen if we don't have any ability to deliver these products. We are responsible for 10% of wheat and also for 14% of corn and 17% of barley. Also, we produce and export buckwheat and other cereals, but according to this situation with blockage of our seaports. Now, we have delivered 30 million tons of our grain to in other countries, but 30 million tons are in grain storages. And you understand, now it is like spring, and our companies, agricultural companies and farmers should start cultivating the crops. And there is a threat that they cannot deliver these products because of blockage of our sea. For example, my father, he is like a farmer, and this year they refused to cultivate corn because they do not have any possibility to increase the export and delivering of this product. That is why it is essential to stop this war and to get the support to prolong sea grain corridor, to open our seaports and protect because now it is real threat that our ships and seaports can be targeted by Russian missiles. Just like an example, our agreement has been signed on 24th of July and 23rd, and on 24th, so next day, Russia launched missiles to our Odessa seaport, and our grain storages were targeted. So it's just next day. So now it is under the guarantees of the United Nations, and because of braveness of our Ukrainians. So yeah, thank you. That's a short comment.
So there was a question to me.
The question.
You're collecting because there was a question to me.
Yes, he also, sorry.
So should I answer?
Yes, no,
or we
now,
come back?
now, Ben, please.
Okay. Well, the short answer, Ukrainian will continue to fight. This is the short answer. Whatever happens with the EU support or us, look, first of all, and we did the poll on that. So we put this question: what would happen if there would be, if the support from the West would be diminishing? Ukrainians said no, we will continue to fight. Part of Ukrainians said that in this situation, we may freeze the conflict, but not agree with concessions to Putin. Because what Putin is saying, oh, I can start negotiations, but under conditions that what I have occupied is Russian territory. So Ukrainians saying no, we are not going to sign any treaty with Putin with the annexation of Ukrainian territories. So this is the short answer. Definitely, it would be difficult to fight. But we stopped Putin because of our fight. So, but frankly speaking, look, what you are saying, diminishing support from the EU, let's include the United States, other countries. That's what Putin would like to see, okay? So his idea is, first of all, I will try to split the West and the global South. I will play on contradictions between them. I will play on contradictions with China and India. Then I would split the West. This is his idea. So far, it didn't happen, vice versa. And I think the more atrocities Russians are doing in Ukraine, they show to the world how brutal, how dangerous is this aggression to the world. Having said that, again, I encourage those countries which are abstaining in the United Nations, like South Africa, for instance, or some other countries. Those countries who proclaim them to be neutral. Okay? You cannot be neutral when you have the rapist and the victim of aggression. We have examples in history on the eve of World War II, when Spanish Republic was attacked by Nazi and Mussolini, who bombarded Spain. Guernica, just one of example, or Guernica, depending on what language you are saying there. Okay. What was position of the UK and France at that time? Non-interference. Spanish Republic was asking for weapons, and the UK and France at that time said, no, we do not interfere. So it was an open road for Hitler and Mussolini, and they proceeded. Look what happened next with Munich Agreement. So appeasement policy doesn't work. And again, you have this example. I am actually, today I was very enthusiastic to read about your position in the Gulf War. So we, again, remember World War II, Brazil was neutral for some time, for 3 years, but then they chose the right side. So again, when we are talking about this situation, again, it's impossible to be neutral. You may support by different means, but neutrality is not the answer to this huge war, unseen in Europe since World War II. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think we have one question coming from the audience, one message here. And we have to excuse our president, Mr. Gordon, because he has another meeting with Gary, another Gary meeting now in a few minutes. So thank you very much, President, for joining us.
Yes, great pleasure to host all of you today.
Gracias.
Gracias.
So please go ahead with your question, and then we have the other was from the audience.
I sympathize with your position regarding Ukrainians' fighting spirit. On the other hand, we have to take into consideration that the West actually is financing this war. And as time goes by, some of the countries involved will find it increasingly burdensome. So they will pressure at one point in time, if the conflict is not resolved, for Ukraine to make certain concessions. I will not go into what concessions, but that could be a possibility. On top of that, in the US, there is always the risk that you will have a Republican president coming next election time, and he will adopt a more isolationist position, which could be harmful to your country. Secondly, I just wanted to make a comment regarding Mrs. Strick's preference for a special tribunal to condemn Mr. Putin. Again, I sympathize, but I think it's unrealistic. You will not get Mr. Putin, the president of the other superpower, to stand trial. The only way this can happen if he is removed from office. For the time being, I don't see that. It's always a possibility, but I'm afraid that it's not a realistic proposal. Thirdly, you made reference to Russia's historical claims on Ukraine. But you did not mention at all another reason, perhaps, such that Putin became envious, or rather afraid, of Ukraine's prosperous, should I say, democratic evolution. And for him, that represented a threat to his own stability back home. So I think that one of the reasons, at least, that he decided to invade your country is that he could not stand a democratic Ukraine next door. I'd like to hear your comments.
Yes, first of all, about this talk. First of all, about special tribunal. The special tribunal is about Russian aggression in general. Okay? Because I'm not a lawyer, so definitely it would be better if you put this question to Alexandra while she was here. But from what I know, for International Criminal Court, it's very difficult to deal with this category, aggression. So that's why we are talking about special tribunal on aggression as a state against other state. Okay, so it's not about Mr. Putin himself, who is definitely, it's criminal, war criminal. That's clear. But there could be a lot of things which can be done, which includes, for example, even now, there was a court in the Netherlands which condemned the perpetrators of the aircraft, civilian aircraft, an H-17, which was shot down by Russians. You know about it, which happened, which tragedy. It happened in 2013. So the more trials we have, the easier would be to isolate Russia and to put pressure. Russian generals should know that they may be persecuted, you know. So we hope also it will be helpful, you know, to freezing Russian активи, як це буде актив англійському? Assets. Russian assets throughout the world. So, you know, we are realists, we understand that until we have Putin in power, yeah, it's not possible to persecute him. And actually, at a certain point, he would leave either to Siberia or to some Emirates and continue his life there. You know, dictators sometimes are doing that. But he should not be in the isolation. And, you know, entourage, Putin's entourage should know about that. And if there is such a pressure, then there are some splits within Putin's entourage. And we see how Russian oligarchs now they're trying somehow to distance themselves, to play the role of mediators in order to save their assets. So the more pressure on them, the more likely they would be to find way out. Now, regarding your third question, Putin attacked Ukraine because it's democracy and Putin is afraid of democracy, right? You're fully right. You're right. So, what's the question? Should we become dictatorship not to be attacked by Putin? No, we have to choose our way. But that's what I'm telling you. And this is a war between democracies and dictatorship, not between West and Russia, not between NATO and Russia. This is because we would like to live on our own. Finally, about the continuation of the war and possibility of negotiations. Let me start with your first phrase. You know, I think it's very important to use the right terminology. You said the West is financing the war. I would phrase it differently. The West is financing Ukrainian fight for freedom, not the war, but Ukrainian fight for freedom. We are fighting here in Ukraine, not only for Ukraine. We are fighting for international order to live without the law of jungles. So look, you mentioned possibility of Republican victory. Okay, you know, democracy is democracy. You never know who would be the next president, what would be his position. We heard a lot previously about, you know, elections in Germany, elections in France, elections in the United States. Okay, there could be elections which are not in any of these countries or other countries that are not favorable for us. So what? Should we give up to Putin? So what is the bottom line? We know the difficulties, but we need to continue to fight for our freedom. Again, I think that you cannot stop people from wanting freedom. Okay, put you in our shoes. Let me describe this phantasmagoric scenario. Argentina is bombarded, all the country, by your former colonial empire. Colonial empire is occupying part of your territory, former colonial empire. And colonial empire is saying there are no Argentinians. You are just part of our empire. No Argentinians. As Russian propaganda is saying, we need to look, quote, de-Ukrainianize Ukraine. Translators cannot translate it. Do you understand the meaning? De-Ukrainianize Ukraine.
Desucranizar Ucrania.
Difficult to understand, right? Okay, so Ukraine without Ukrainians. Ukraine should be divided into many quasi-states with no name Ukraine in the title. Now, apply it to you. It's difficult to imagine, but that's what Putin and his propaganda is saying about Ukraine. This is ideological background for genocide. What would you do in this case? What would you do?
Actually fight back.
Exactly. So why we should behave differently? We are fighting. Whatever is the situation, we will continue to fight. Definitely. If there would be decrease of the support, and that's what Putin is hoping for. Like Hitler was hoping Roosevelt died, the next president would stop the war. Like Hitler hoped that the cabinet in the UK will change and the new cabinet would be in favor of signing agreement with Hitler. You know, dictators, they always think like that. So I think we need just to present them with very clear position that we are not reducing support to Ukraine, but vice versa. And we would be thankful for that. Be on the right side of the history. Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, may I give you my personal experience? When there was attack against Kyiv, I live 10 kilometers from the front line. Okay, it's north of the Kyiv, 10 kilometers. The situation first days was very nervous. I was commenting all the time for different media, but at certain point, I decided, what should I do? Russians are coming. I decided to take arms. So I went to military registration point. It was maybe on the third day of the war. What I saw there, I saw the huge line from young to old, Ukrainian speakers, Russian speakers. At the end of the day, I couldn't get the arm because there was lack of arms. So many people decided to take voluntarily the arms. When I saw it, I became very optimistic immediately. And the result, you know, Putin had to retreat from Kyiv. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this touching anecdote of your own life and your explanations. And now we have a question from the audience.
Buenos días. Hello. Thank you for your magnificent presentation. My name is Alexander Slavchuk. I'm from Transatlantic Dialogue Center, the think tank from Ukraine. Вітання, колеги. Дуже радий був. Ми слухаємо вас з Києва, з Україною, з колегами. So my question is to Your Excellency, Miss Ambassador Lila, Senora Lila La Pregunta para usted. Do you think that Argentinian politicians, political elites understand the threat of Russian aggression that is going on here in the Eastern Europe? And do you think that Argentinian elites are aware of this global threat that the authoritarian regimes are doing right now in Ukraine? So we in Ukraine are always looking for mutual interests between Ukraine and Latin America, and we are looking at very actively this mutual interest right now. So it would be really very interesting for us to see the position of Argentinian elites, intellectuals about the threat of Russian authoritarianism. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, but in fact, I'm not a part of the panel. But if you allow me, I will answer very briefly. You know, the Argentine position has been of condemnation of Russian invasion, as the rest of the global south, most of it. It hasn't been active in applying sanctions, if that's what you mean. And there are many reasons for that. Reasons that maybe our politicians don't think yet, maybe, that our national interest is very compromised by this war, because it's a far away war. But slowly they begin to understand that the effects of the war are universal, are global. And we talk today of global insecurity, food insecurity, and higher inflation, and short investments. There are many fertilizers are not coming to Argentina from Ukraine or Russia, and they are an essential part of our agricultural production, for instance. So I think that that's why in our short meeting, private meeting with the panelists before this open meeting, we were talking about the need for Ukraine to be more present to the press, to the public opinion, because we that are devoted to this subject, to politics, international politics, are aware of what is happening, but general public is not. And they sympathize with Ukraine. The general feeling in Argentina is with Ukraine for the war to end, and Ukrainians to be free, independent, and recover their territory. That's our position as a people, I could say, because I talked to many people about this, and I know this is the general feeling. And I think that politicians are beginning to realize that they need to accompany this general feeling. So I hope we'll be more active in our support, not only humanitarian support, but also in other ways, and for sure in the international organizations as well. Another question? We have another question? Yes, please, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Carlos Peiza from the Chamber of Companies in Argentina. I've been invited to this meeting. Thank you very much. I would like to ask you, Professor, what's your perception of the evolution of the war in terms of whether the defense, we know it's very, very effective and it exceeds all what the Russians expected. They started the attack. But how is the impression at this point in time, say March 2023, about the evolution of the action war itself? Is there a continuation of the effectiveness of the Ukrainian defense, or do you think that that you're in more danger than you were 2 months ago, for example? What's the perception in that respect?
Okay, look, yeah, thank you. I think you're from business. I think you would ask how to make money, how to be. By the way, when the war would finish, so there are huge reconstruction plans for Ukraine, and the international community has already promised a lot of money to invest into that, and Argentinian companies may also participate in it.
Rebuilding.
Huge reconstruction of the country. But regarding your question, look, first of all, we need to compare with the first days of the war, when Russians tried to attack through different fronts. They were close to Kyiv. As I have said, there was a real threat that they could seize the Kyiv, but it didn't happen. Russians didn't manage to seize any regional Ukrainian center, with exception of Kherson, which was then liberated by Ukrainians. They didn't manage to seize even Kharkiv, which is 40 kilometers from the border with Russia. So they had to retreat. They had to retreat in the north. Then there was successful Ukrainian counter-offensive in the east, in the south as well. So what's happening right now? So definitely now situation is much better than in the beginning. And we started finally to receive more support, though belated. Again, Western support is very belated. We asked NATO to close skies a year ago. We asked NATO to supply, okay, you don't want to close skies, give us air defense system, give us jets, give us tanks. No. Why? Very cautious. So, but finally, there is decision to supply tanks, there is decision to supply air defense system. It's not there yet. Hopefully it will be soon. There's no decision as to jets so far. Maybe Poland will supply us, Soviet type jets, maybe. So, but we hope it's changing position. This is very important. The position of international partners is changing. So my military estimation, what's going on right now, Russia cannot continue the large-scale offensive. Now the fights are around small city of Bakhmut. Russia needs to seize the city just to say that we seized something, to demonstrate this is a victory, which is actually a small city. Okay,
Right.
We don't know what would happen. The fights there are very, very tough. We don't know. Maybe Ukrainians would be able to keep the city. Maybe we had to withdraw from the city. Again, I'm not military. There is a decision to continue, Ukrainian decision to continue fight for Bakhmut. But if Russians, take the Bakhmut, it will not change the strategic equation. They do not control even the whole of Donbass. No, they're not able. The question is now, what would happen next? Definitely, we Ukrainians are hoping for our counteroffensive in spring. But to a great extent, we cannot do counteroffensive without tanks and without jets. So if you want to liberate our territory, yes, we need this support. So for you, international community, there are two choices. Either supply Ukraine with weapons to liberate our territories and to stop the war soon, or not to supply. If you do not supply the weapons, it would mean that the war would continue. More Ukrainians will die and more Russian soldiers would die. Russians lost more than 1,000 soldiers for a year. For 10 years of the war in Afghanistan, do you remember how much they lost? 15. For 1 year of war in Ukraine, more than 100,000. But Putin doesn't care. He is dictator. He is sending Russian young soldiers to die. What for? Okay. Let me just briefly also, this is very important point, is that, look, this is not fight between ethnic Ukrainians and ethnic Russians. Okay? Do you understand what I mean? No, let me explain. So, in Ukrainians, majority are ethnic Ukrainians and majority are Orthodox. But we have understanding of Ukrainian political nation. You can understand it because you are a nation of immigrants, okay? So it means, first of all, that all Ukrainians are basically bilingual. We speak both languages with no problems. We have very many mixed families. I'm half Ukrainian, half Russian. My first language was Russian language. And Putin's huge mistake was, he thought, oh, there are some regions in Ukraine which are heavily Russified. So these Russian speakers, Ukrainians, they would greet Ukrainian or Russian soldiers with flowers. No way, with ballads, okay? Russian speakers, ethnic Russians in Ukraine, they are a legitimate part of Ukrainian political nation. Putin did incredible things. He managed to unite Jews and Muslims in Ukraine to fight for independent Ukraine. No, this is true. This is true. So the problem is not between ethnic Ukrainians and ethnic Russians. Ethnic Russians, again, in Ukraine, they're Ukrainian patriots. They're part of our nation. The problem is with Russians in Russia who consider to think in the paradigm of imperialism, they would like to make us happy, to free, to liberate us, and they would like to lead the whole world. The whole world, you know, this is a tradition of actually Russian Orthodox Church, of Russian Empire, that we will show the light to the world. Russian famous novelist Dostoevsky, he was Russian chauvinist. He was fighting against Catholic Church, right? Rotten Catholic Church, because he believed that only Russian Orthodoxy would be able to bring the happiness to the whole world. We are different, Ukrainians. And when I'm saying Ukrainians, I mean all who live in Ukraine. We do not differentiate. We do not ask, "Oi, are you Russian? Are you Ukrainian?" No, when we speak to each other, we don't know actually. We do not ask about that.
And
Thank you.
like comment.
Thank you, Professor.
Short comment. One sentence just. When we talk about weapon for Ukraine, it means that Ukraine defend yourself, our identity and independence. When we talk about weapon for Russia, it means that they prolong the war. And it is also important question and issue about sanction, economic sanction to Russia, because when you buy something Russian, it means that you pay taxes to this country that assists them to receive more money, to produce more weapon, to prolong this war. That is why we also call on to provide this sanction to Russian goods, to Russian companies, probably independent, private, individual private persons. Now it is like all questions are important. So sanctions, please.
Yeah, this is a tough question, you know, because
But
there is realpolitik, you know, business, but I mean, with businesses, with Russia cannot be business as usual. You know, Europe believed in business with Russia. So they, you know, developed all these huge pipelines. They became dependent on Russian gas, despite the war in Ukraine since 2014. Russia started aggression in 2014, and Germans signed another agreement, Nord Stream 2. And now, only now, they realized, Europe, finally, that they are too dependent. So, because Putin is weaponizing energy, fertilizers, and
Thank you very much, Professor. There's something that you said that was going to be my question, not for me, but just for clarification for the audience, because I think I know the answer. I've known it for a long time, but it's the question of identity between an ethnicity, between Russian-speaking Ukrainians and Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians. I've always sustained, because I visited Kharkiv and Donetsk and Lugansk and all the cities in the provinces in the east of Ukraine. And I've always seen Ukrainians, not Russians, working for their economy, studying in universities and hoping to go to Europe to perfection their studies and come back to Ukraine. And one anecdote, after 2014 and the annexation of Crimea, I used to visit universities all the time. And I offered at the time a program which we have in Argentina, which is called Study in Argentina, which brings students from other countries and gives them the opportunity to study here in free universities. And I always did that. I always offered this program to students. And on that occasion, one of the students stood up and asked me, "Ambassador, why do you want us to leave our country?"
Right.
We don't want to leave our country. We want to study here, to stay here and fight for Ukraine. That was the best gift they could give me, these students, in all my stay there. And the other example, and the other example that I give in every speech, in every occasion I have, is that the fiercest fight for Ukraine is in the East, where, as Professor Haran said, Putin hoped the soldiers will be received with flowers and glory to Russia and our sabers. And those are the cities that are absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. There's nothing left of many cities in the East.
Russian-speaking cities were destroyed by Russia.
By Russians. And the territories that the Russian government annexed by their law, by their legislation, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, there were most civil fighters are fighting against Russia and, with the army. Yeah. And that's to answer this question of the division between Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking Ukraine. They're all Ukrainians. You want it?
I know that there is a question from Mr. Pessoitsa in our audience, but I'd like now to sorry, because I should go to another meeting. We have really tired and intensive schedule nowadays, and thank you so much for your support, and we expect to continue our dialogue.
There is a question over there.
Yes, but we have Ambassador Sergei Kislitsa, who has joined us, a very dear friend of mine. Sergei, good morning, how are you?
Sí, buenos días, Lila. ¿Se escucha bien?
Ambassador Kislitsa is present time the permanent representative of Ukraine before the United Nations, and he's been Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ukraine, a very respected diplomat, a brilliant diplomat, I should say, if I may, because he's my friend, but it's the truth. So, Sergei, you wanted to pose a question?
Do you hear me well? Do you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Desde el principio, querida Lila, me gustaría agradecer a tú, mi buena amiga, por informarme sobre este evento y muchas gracias a Kari por organizarlo.
Gracias.
I think that these kind of events is it's a very important thing to organize because it provides an extra opportunity to have this frank discussion. And I'm here not to make comments, but to express my appreciation for the activities of Kari. I remember how you, Lila, organized it to Kari when I was in Buenos Aires. And I would like to say a couple of things. So first of all, I express my readiness to be online with Kari and to speak about multilateralism, to speak about the United Nations, para hablar sobre la cooperación entre la delegación ucraniana y la delegación argentina aquí en Nueva York. Nosotros tenemos relaciones muy estrechas y yo estoy trabajando con la embajadora María del Carmen casi cada día. In any case, I believe in multilateralism. I believe that there are many wonderful things that the United Nations can do to prevent these kind of aggressions in the future. It goes without saying that the system as designed in 1945 does not operate in a manner that would allow us to stop this war immediately, but we should not lose our belief in multilateralism. And the final thing I would like to say in Spanish is, si Ucrania deja de luchar, dejará de existir. Si Rusia deja de luchar, la guerra habrá terminado. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Sergio. Excelentes palabras. Thank you very much, Ambassador Kislitsa. And I take your word, and you will be soon invited to speak to us here at CARI. We are very interested in having you as our guest. So,
There is a
any other
question from
questions?
there, and
Yes, please.
there are some comments.
I will just write a message. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other question from the audience? If,
Yeah, let me, there are questions from there? Zoom, no?
I don't see any.
Let me maybe, again, because we are talking, okay?
Yeah.
No? Okay, it was mentioned that we are Ukrainian speakers, Russian speakers, again. It was very artificial in Western press, to divide Ukraine. This is Ukrainian speaking Ukraine, which wants to join Europe. This is Russian speaking Ukraine, which want to join Russia. No, so it's more complicated. So again, as I have said, basically all Ukrainians are bilingual, okay? So in this situation, as Ambassador rightly pointed out, Russian, those who mostly speak in Russian, okay, they are Ukrainian patriots as well. So, and it's proved by this war, because when the war started in 2014, many volunteer battalions, which were formed of volunteers, they comprised a huge segment of Russian speakers from Donbass. And they were saying in Russian language, we are fighting for Ukrainian Donbass against Putin. They were saying it in Russian language, okay? If you go to Kiev, you will see that what Lavrov is saying about how Russian speakers are beaten in Kiev. This is Goebbels type line. You may find, you can hear a lot of Russian speakers in Kiev, no problem. If you go to the front line, you'll see what are the languages spoken in Ukrainian army. Ukrainian and Russian, no problem. No problem, what language do you speak? Having said that, I would like to stress that now, objective, because we have this brutal Russian invasion, many people, including Russian speakers from the East, because they saw by their own eyes these atrocities. So they try to distance themselves from Russia. Russian speakers who previously believed, you saw the graph, that it's possible to live with Russia in peace. Now they are saying, no, we don't want Russians to come here. And actually, every third Ukrainian had to leave the home. Every third, 1 to 3, to leave the home because of huge destroyments made by Russia. So now there is a general trend from below, not from authorities, from below. So Russian-speaking Ukrainians, they are more driven now they would like to learn Ukrainian, to speak more Ukrainian, to be more involved in the Ukrainian culture. So this is a natural process, okay? But having said that, okay, there's nothing which threatens Russian language. Okay, now there's, all Ukrainians, they agree that we need to know Ukrainian language. It should be one state language, the language which is used by public officials. There's no quarrel about it. But Russian language will continue to exist. No problem. It's up to you what language you will speak in your private life, in communication. So again, as I have said, ethnic Russians and Russian speakers are legitimate part of Ukrainian nation. If they consider themselves to be part of Ukrainian nation, please, no problem, and continue to speak your language. Okay, thank you.
Just to I will close.
Yeah.
Please, Reverend.
Yes, thank you so much. What I want to stress that Ukraine, as a previous Pope John Paul II said, it's a laboratory of ecumenism. So we are all belongs to different kind of churches and religious organization. We have a Jewish and Muslims. They are united today in one voice. We are against this aggression that came from the Russian Federation. And our churches, especially Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church I am representing, right now became a shelter. Because a few days ago, whole night was bombing Ukraine. You never know where this bomb goes. Today's it is evening time in Ukraine, but we had already 4 times of alarm, so all people need to go to shelter. And Ukraine right now, Ukrainian churches are playing this role of shelters for people. It doesn't matter what religion they belong, they come to hide. They come to save their lives, and the church is trying to do this. Besides prayers, we are doing this role also. So, thank you for support, and we ask for help just to resist Ukraine.
Let me just say one interesting thing. So when we had 2 Ukrainian revolutions, because we are here to exchange, and to tell the Orange Revolution and European Maidan. One is called Maidan first, Maidan second. So a lot of people, who gathered in the central square of Kyiv. So every day in Maidan during these 2 revolutions started with a common prayer of representatives of all the confessions in Ukraine. So it was very touching, to see on the stage all the confessions, they were praying together. That's very important, and that's the difference between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, and we have abused of our guests' time, because it's been 2 hours practically we are here. That means that it's so interesting, and we'll keep you here all day.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
It is so important that they are sharing this experience, these ideas with us. But I simply want to stress, I'm not going to make a longer statement now because of the hour, the advanced hour, but I simply want to stress resilience in Ukrainians. Ukraine is a resilient people, not only now or since 2014, but for ages. For ages, Ukraine was subject to domination, wars, and battles, and stripping parts of its territory because it's a rich territory, because it's a very interesting people. All of the industry that the Soviet Union had and Russia inherited came from Ukrainian mines, most of it. Most of the inventors of nuclear sites and aviation and helicopters and everything. If you visit universities in Polytechnic University in Kyiv, you are going to see all the pictures of great scientists that made the richness of the Soviet Union, and they were all Ukrainian. So they have been battling for their independence and their identity for centuries. And I think this is the final battle. And I think you are going to win. Because never before Ukraine has been so united.
Correct.
Ukrainians have never been so united as you very rightly stressed, from the north to the south, from the west to the east. And so I'll just finish this with a very, very deep thank you to you and to all Ukrainians. Slava Ukraina.
Героям слава. Красиво.
We signed today is an agreement with here in Argentina.
That's very, okay, perfect. Congratulations.
Si algún day off the record es la Ucrania.
La Ucrania, ya dijimos, te lo dije. Muchas gracias a la audiencia por Zoom.
Nice.
Vemos pronto, espero, en otra reunión que podamos organizar. Hasta luego, gracias.